Thank you guys for joining us again. Welcome to Conversations That Matter. I'm Ron Gray, your host, and I am here in segment 3 with my friend, Dr. Melissa Cheeseman. Thank you for joining us again.
Glad to be here.
She is an emergency medicine physician and faith leader in our community, and we've been talking about the intersection of politics and religion. Very polarizing, but I think it's such an important topic to talk about. So I hope you'll find a place in your life to examine what you think, how you feel on things, share the conversation with your family and friends. And today I wanted to get back into the conversation with you and learn more about you as a medical doctor and a faith leader, and how those have intersected in your life. So let's start off in the beginning as a young woman, and what made you want to get into medicine?
Yeah, that's kind of funny, actually, because it wasn't actually a very high calling. I got into medicine because my parents told me I couldn't. When I threw it out as an idea, like I'd like to go to medical school, my mom's like, you don't even like to read. You can't do medical school.
No.
I'm like, oh, you just watch me, right? So probably just a little bit of a rebellious streak. But
well, you're fortunate that you were very intelligent.
Well, I followed through on it, and here we are 20, 30 years later, still doing medicine. So it worked out, but maybe didn't have the best reasons for.
Well, you had to fall in love with it or find that you connected with it in some way. What did your early years in medicine look like? Yeah,
so I actually trained initially in a different specialty that was far more intense, really, than emergency medicine is, and I decided to cut that residency short, ended up active duty with the military, so I served 4 years with the Air Force.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I was 2 years in South Georgia and 2 years in Colorado Springs.
Wow.
And then when I got out of the military, trying to figure out what to do, the University of Kentucky had started an emergency medicine program. I wanted to come back to Kentucky, so I thought, well, that's perfect. I'll just go do emergency medicine, and did that, graduated from residency in 2001 in emergency medicine. So I've been doing that ever since.
Wow.
It's been kind of fun, full circle too, because just in the last couple years, I've left private emergency medicine. I'm at the VA hospital, the Veterans Hospital now. So it's kind of come full circle. My active duty time, now I'm back serving the veterans. And so that's been a really good move and a lot of fun to be serving now the veterans in that setting. So
well, not to sound cliche, because I did not know that. Thank you for your service then.
Absolutely.
And obviously now too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, our relationship is kind of full circle too, for the audience that may not know. I was an RN in my first career, and I worked with you back at St. Joseph Hospital in Lexington for a short period.
All life comes full circle, right?
It does. And who would have thought,
Who would have thought?
Yeah. Well, so you spent your professional career in emergency medicine, but you also have been very involved in the faith community.
Yeah.
And tell us about that and how that evolved.
Sure.
Or how it began and then how it's evolved over the years.
Yeah, that's looked a lot of different ways. I became involved in faith and became a Jesus follower through Young Life, which is an outreach to high school kids.
Okay.
Huge fan of Young Life. And that kind of, some experience with that made me wonder if I could perhaps do some teaching. And so when I came back to Lexington, the senior pastor at Crossroads Christian Church, Glenn Schneider's, for whatever reason believed in me and allowed me to start teaching in church. So I was on the teaching team at Crossroads for like 15 years, so a long time.
Wow.
Which really gave me the opportunity not just to grow and learn and teach, but I also headed up our outward focus stuff, which was serving in the community. So it got me involved in missions to Haiti and New Orleans and inner city and that kind of stuff, and really got me a lot of exposure to lots of different people and ways of life and ways of being. So that was huge. Since then, probably involved in a couple different ways. My husband Jeff and I started Wellspring Prayer Center, which is a prayer center downtown Lexington that has lots of different churches, people involved in it, which has been a lot of fun. And then I'm on the board of a nonprofit right now called Lane of Roses, which is a faith-based opportunity to encourage and empower young women. So,
wow, that's great.
So lots of opportunity there.
What's the name of the organization again?
Lane of Roses.
Lane of Roses. Okay. We'll get the website from you and we'll
Sure.
put it on the website.
Yeah.
Or the website from you and put it on the screen so
Sure.
folks can
Yeah, it's
check
an
it out.
amazing organization.
And follow it.
So.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And you've also been involved in mission work over the years. I remember when I met you 20 years ago,
Yep.
You were going to Haiti then.
Yep.
I've been to Haiti a couple of times myself after the earthquake and then during the cholera outbreak.
Sure.
Well, I think, that was the same thing, but I've been there twice.
But
tell us a little bit about that and how that's evolved over the years.
Yeah, that's been a lot of fun. So I started in Haiti, but I think our biggest commitment right now is with Compassion International. We travel to Bolivia every year to help sponsors meet their Compassion kids, and we take Wellspring down to Bolivia. But we just got back from Nepal, which was a mission trip to, there's a real hope to reach unreached people groups who don't have access to the Bible or anything like that in their language. And so the city of Lexington has adopted the country of Nepal in terms of helping resource them to get the Bible into their language in all the unreached tribes and people groups. So we got to go and be a part of, or to see, kind of how all that's working. So that's really, really recent. Like we just got back on Sunday. So that's been really recent.
Yeah.
But
do you also do mission work and involved on the medical side of things?
We did to Bolivia. We helped, when I was at Crossroads, we helped build a medical clinic in Bolivia. Great. It's really interesting because as a healthcare professional that I do every day, sometimes when we go overseas, I like to do something totally different. Like happy to do construction, or dig dishes, or do whatever.
Yeah.
And it's also a challenging environment because you go to some of these countries, they don't have refrigeration, they don't have consistent people coming, so you're not quite sure how much of a long-term impact that you're making. But nevertheless, people, everybody wants to be valued. And so when you go and people know that you spend a lot of money and you travel a far distance for no reason other than to come help them and serve them and be with them, I mean, it's just that in its own right makes a huge difference to people. We wouldn't think that, but it's amazing.
Well,
how
sometimes all anyone needs is to know that they're noticed,
that somebody cares.
Someone else cares.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think I'm involved in a charity here in town called the Toy Chest Children's Charity. And we do clothes and toys at Christmas time, and I think sometimes all anybody needs, whether it's a kid or those parents or grandparents are raising kids, they need to know somebody in the community sees them and they matter, and they're, for whatever reason, they're down on their luck, and somebody cares enough to help. And I think that really brings us back to a real human place.
Absolutely.
Gets us away from the TV and cable news and listen to bullcrap about politics, right? And gets us back to a really solid world of faith and why and what we should be doing. Right? Maybe
reminds us that everybody has inherent values, inherent value. Right.
Even those folks we disagree with in the political arena,
because we don't understand, we don't look like, whatever.
Exactly.
Everybody has inherent value.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I have. A question I want to talk about that'll bring us back closer to the politics and religion, or faith and policy discussion. As a medical scientist, have you ever created conflict, or has that ever created conflict with your faith leader in you?
Yeah, it has, and probably several things that come to mind right away. When I was a resident in a different discipline, I did neurosurgery residency initially. My fourth year of that, I decided to do a year of research. And so we were doing a lot of stem cell research at the time on rhesus monkeys. And we were looking at Parkinson's, like how could we use stem cells to resolve some Parkinson's symptoms and stuff. And it started out to be a lot of fun and intriguing and interesting and all of that. But then there was this sort of parallel societal conversation, social conversation about when this moves from monkeys to humans, what's going to be the source of those stem cells. And so there was starting to percolate conversations that those would come from aborted fetuses. And then, as many people do, that kind of conversation went a direction that probably isn't true, but nevertheless scared me a little bit, that we would then be paying to harvest these stem cells in order to, so you're kind of doing something maybe you don't agree with to fix a problem. And that was really hard for me to reconcile the possibilities of science with sort of issues regarding sanctity of life and what's that going to be, and can that be abused, and is somebody going to take power and money and make that something it was never intended to be. So I ended up kind of getting out of that, although I would love more than anybody to find a cure to Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and all of that, but that just became a little bit of a conflict of not quite sure how to navigate that. I think the other one that's at least another one that's really a day-to-day issue even still, of trying to reconcile medical care with faith with regards to compassion and all that, is the current issue with regards to narcotic addiction issues. Because one side would say, people come to you with pain, your responsibility as a physician is to cure their pain, but you also know that the cure to their pain could be their death. When it comes to addiction and all of that. And so it's a daily conversation of what does compassion for another human being, how does that line up with your medical ability to provide a fix or
and
solution?
Interestingly enough, how the conflict between medicine and faith influences policy.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that more and more, especially in Kentucky, how legislators are stepping up to talk about this and asking experts like yourself, how do we address this crisis? Because it really is a crisis, not only in Kentucky, but across the country. So have you ever found another issue where medicine and faith become a conflict and it is entangled in policy in some way?
Well,
what about the right to die?
I was going to say end of life issues may be another complicated one. Our technology has advanced to the degree that we could really extend life beyond quality and beyond what I believe even maybe God intended as his kids, you know.
So you have a conflict between medicine and faith, and then that influences policy, which we really haven't gotten too far across the country yet. A couple of states we have, but so how do you not necessarily how you feel on that, but how does that dynamic influence your practice?
I think maybe as much as anything, it kind of saddens me that we can't kind of come to a good place, because I can't really necessarily ascribe to euthanasia, because if life is valuable at the beginning, it's valuable at the end, right? So you got to be consistent in what you really think there. But at the same time, I think technology allows us to prolong things way more than they should. So I find myself often standing with families in this tension of what's the right thing. And
probably more often than a lot of other physicians, because you're in emergency care.
And you don't want to tell them what to do, but you definitely feel their pain. It all seems black and white when you're here looking at end-of-life questions. That same thing happened with my dad. Like sitting here, it looks all black and white. When that time comes, blah, blah. But it's all shades of gray when, between here and there. It's just not that cut and dry. And so how do you reconcile what you could do with medicine versus what really is the compassionate thing to do versus what does the government say that you can or can't do? Right.
Do you think I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
It's okay.
Do you think as a medical professional, science and faith should have more determinant over that than government, or is that a place that leads us into a danger zone?
Yeah.
Should we have the right to make our own decision? In a lot of respects, we do.
Yeah.
But should government overreach into that space as much as government does, or do you feel like it is a balance to the parallel?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because on the one hand, I do think we should have the right to make decisions on our behalf. It gets a little complicated when you're making decisions on somebody else's behalf, and the government's making decisions on all of our behalf.
Right,
you know?
That's true.
So that sort of top-down projection of your values on other people is a tough one. So I'm not sure.
Something for folks to think about.
Yeah. Well, you look at some of these countries that have socialized medicine, and so they cut the age of hemodialysis off at a certain level, and beyond that you can't. It doesn't matter if you're young, and I mean, if you're healthy and all of that, if you're this age, you don't qualify for that treatment. Well, that's government legislating health care on a general broad swath, rather than doing a case by case by case to say, in this case, this would be appropriate, this would be appropriate, this would be appropriate. So I'm not a huge fan of government inflicting its authority in some of that, but at the same time I understand there's needed safeguards, you know, because we don't all make wise choices for ourselves or other people.
Right.
So I understand the need for some safeguards.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one.
So in your everyday life, who's the leader? The scientist or the Christ follower?
Yeah, the Christ follower.
Yeah?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I managed to reconcile most things, you know, fairly well, but at the end of the day, that's going to drive the behavior.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. What do you think we need to do as a society to, whether you identify with Christianity or another faith or no faith at all, to become more human towards one another versus so divided? What can we do as a society overall?
I think the number one thing comes back to the very thing we talked about at the beginning, is that we really need to stop seeing people as issues and jumping on an opinion straight away without any information or anything to back it up, and actually start seeing each other.
Yeah.
You know, when we understand each other, and you know, it's the racial divide. When was the last time you sat down with somebody of a different race and heard their story?
Right.
You make assumptions about that.
Yeah.
They make assumptions about that. But when's the last time you sat down and heard their story?
Right.
So I think until social media and so much other stuff gives us permission to just jump on stuff, throw out an opinion, create conflict, and then walk away, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot more guts and a lot more time to sit down and actually talk about it, process it with somebody.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the solution's in that. How much patience and tolerance and grace people have for actually doing that, I don't know. We've become an instant gratification society, which means we have instant opinions, instant solutions, instant judgment,
instant knowledge,
which really isn't even knowledge.
No, it's not at all.
You know? So
we've Googled it really fast if we don't think we know, or we've asked our neighbor or our mom or whoever.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this has been a riveting conversation, and I appreciate you sitting down with me and giving me the chance to have the conversation with you. And I hope our audience has enjoyed it. There's 3 segments to this conversation with Dr. Cheeseman. Segment 1, 2, and 3. We're learning just a little bit more about her now. So take time and catch up on segment 1 and 2 if you have not. You can learn more about the conversations at conversationsthatmatter.co. You can link up to our Facebook and Instagram pages there, and subscribe to our YouTube and iTunes channels. So I hope you'll take time to discover the commonality among you and your neighbors and your friends and your family, and lead with that, because you know, leading with our differences just doesn't seem to work as well anymore.
Yeah, fair enough.
So thanks again, and until then, good night.